Hello, my name is Keith, and in this video I'm going to talk about the third precept in Buddhism, which is Kamesu Michachara Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Now, we've already talked about the last three words, Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami, meaning I undertake the training precept to abstain from something. So what are we abstaining from in the third precept? Well, kamesu is sensual pleasure. That's pleasures of the senses of the body. Usually refers to sexual pleasures, but not only sexual pleasures. But that's the context where it's usually taken. That would be kamesu. Michachara, so micha and achara. Achara is conduct, and micha would be unethical or unwholesome. So we are undertaking the training principle to abstain from misconduct in the context of sensual pleasures. So the way this is usually translated into English is that we undertake to abstain from sexual misconduct. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, the Buddha gave lists of what constituted sexual misconduct, and it includes things like rape, coercion, underage sex, so paedophilia, incest, incestual relationships. It also included where you have sex with somebody when you're in a relationship with somebody else. So not all parties are aware of what's happening. What we're talking about here is sexual misconduct being any situation where sexual activities cause harm or cause suffering to someone else. So remember, it's just a refinement of that first precept, but in the context of sexual activity, or more generally, in the context of anything that brings about pleasure. Now, it does seem to be that religions have something of a preoccupation with people's sex lives. Buddhism apparently is not above that. So when the Buddha was talking about people's sex lives, why would he get involved with that? And the main reason is because sexual pleasure is a very, very strong driving force in human behavior. You only have to look at the advertising industry to see that sex sells. But why does it sell? Well, it sells because people like feeling physical pleasure, and sex is very pleasurable. And so people like having sex. It's as simple as that. But it can be overwhelmingly in control of someone's decision making. If someone is in a position where they're able to have sex and experience that sort of physical pleasure, that releases certain hormones, certain chemical messengers in the brain that cause pleasure. And if someone is usually not experiencing these sorts of pleasures and they get the opportunity to experience these pleasures, that can cloud the decision-making process. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying this is something that happens. We are still primitive animals, all of us. We're all apes after all, and we are still to some level driven by these very basic instincts, and reproduction is one of them. And why do we want to reproduce? Because sex feels nice. That's one of the main drivers. Well, at least I think that's one of the main drivers. So we've got this list, but you'll notice that what's not included on the list of things that count as sexual misconduct are anything to do with sexuality. So homosexuality, bisexuality, any of the more nuanced aspects of human sexuality aren't included. As long as all partners are consenting and there is no harm caused by the activities, then they are not opposed by the third precept, or they do not oppose the third precept. So that's interesting because that's quite different to perhaps what you experience in some other religions where homosexual relationships are seen as forbidden or taboo. That's not the case in Buddhism at all. Even the idea of sex before marriage in some religions is seen as taboo, but in in Buddhism, edit that bit out. In Buddhism, that is not the case. In Buddhism, sex before marriage, well, what is marriage if not just a officiating of some sort of relationship, a coupling of two people? And homosexual marriage, it's fine. There's nothing that prohibits it. Now, monks will undertake more strict rules, not just precepts, but real rules. And monks will abstain from all sexual activity altogether. So they will be celibate. And again, this is religion getting involved in people's sex lives. So why would monks be told to be celibate? Because the sexual urge can be very damaging to someone's practice. It will cloud the mind and it will cause them to make decisions that would not perhaps be in their best interest or in the best interest of other people. So for monks, celibacy is the best way to avoid this situation where sex can cause a barrier to their spiritual progress. But no one says you have to be a monk. It's not required to be a monk to be a Buddhist. And no one said that you can't become enlightened if you are a lay person. Absolutely you can. And there are plenty of stories in the Pali Canon where people have become enlightened as lay people. So clearly sexual activity is not something that prevents enlightenment, but it can be something that has to be handled mindfully, carefully, thoughtfully, and ethically. So all the precepts have a positive side to them as well. What's the positive side to the third precept? Well, the positive side to that is with stillness, simplicity, and contentment, I purify my body. And remember, the purification of the body refers to the purification of bodily acts. And by purification, we mean to become more like the Buddha. So stillness, simplicity, and contentment. If we were truly content in our lives, then the promise of sex wouldn't cause us to adjust our decision making. If we were truly content, then we wouldn't need the sex, that pleasure, to fill some spiritual void. Again, there's nothing wrong with experiencing sensual pleasure, and sensual pleasure can take many forms. I should say this as well. So eating a lovely big cream cake might be considered indulging in sensual pleasure. And eating a big slice of cheesecake once in a while is not going to cause harm, but eating a whole cheesecake every day is going to lead to high blood pressure, it's going to lead to clogged arteries, it's going to lead to premature death, and it's going to lead to some degree of suffering before the end. So if you were truly content, then would you be trying to fill that spiritual void with food? Just because the food is physically pleasurable doesn't mean that we require it all the time. We need to eat, but there are ways of eating that cause less harm. And I think this is what we're really talking about with this positive form of the third precept: stillness, simplicity, and contentment. So simplicity is, as much as we can, stripping away all the extra stuff in our lives that distract us from our spiritual aims. Our spiritual aims are to become more like the Buddha. Our spiritual aims are for enlightenment, for transcendental experience of the nature of reality. And cream cakes, cheesecakes, and sex are not necessarily going to help us in that pursuit. So stillness, the idea of just settling right down, not being perturbed and knocked this way and that by the winds of the world. Stillness, simplicity, contentment. These are good things that we should all be aspiring to and trying to cultivate through our actions. And what will those actions look like? Well, I don't really know, to be honest with you. What would it look like to behave in a contented way? You'd have to be contented to behave in that way. So reflection on the positives in our life, reflection on the spiritual virtues that we get to experience, all these sorts of things are going to adjust our mindset and adjust our worldview so that the pursuit of sensual pleasures doesn't become our main aim. And I think for most people it is. Most people want to earn a lot of money so they can buy things that make them feel good, so they can eat nice food, so they can drive nice cars and live in nice houses, and so on and so on and so on. And all of those things, those pursuing of things that will make them feel good, they're all trying to find ways to happiness. Now, Buddhism has a way to happiness, which is the eradication of suffering. And the eradication of suffering comes about by realization of the Four Noble Truths, realization of the nature of reality. And we'll get to all of that in later videos. And so the pursuit of happiness in Buddhism is not a material happiness. It's not pleasure in a sensual sense. It is a transcendental pleasure, a transcendental joy, a transcendental happiness. That's what we're trying to pursue. And the pursuing other forms of pleasure and having those forms of pleasure taking some control over us so that we make bad decisions and we behave in bad ways that are damaging to ourselves and to others, well, that would be unethical. So that's where the third precept comes in. It's an opportunity to reorientate our life towards the Dharma, towards Buddhist practice, towards the pursuit of stillness, simplicity, and contentment in order to try to get closer to the nature of the Buddha. Well, hopefully you found that interesting. I should point out that there are some small groups of Buddhists who do have very conservative, let's say, views about sexuality. They are not supported by the Pali Canon nor any serious Pali scholars at all. But we will find that in all groups in society, where there will always be some people who get involved. I'm talking, of course, about LGBTQ issues. I'm talking about religions who feel that homosexuality is sinful. Buddhism is not one of those. But if you go to certain traditional Buddhist countries, sometimes they're not quite as open-minded and not quite as enlightened as we would like them to be. There is all sorts of cultural baggage there, but it's just not found in the Pali Canon. The Buddha did not ever say anything about homosexuality or transgender issues or anything like that. As a matter of fact, in Vajrayana, in Tantric Buddhism, we have figures, bodhisattvas, who are androgynous. They are referred to sometimes as male and sometimes as female. They're considered to have the attributes of both. They're considered to have the behaviors of both. They're neither one thing nor the other, nor both nor neither. They are transcendental beings, transcending issues of sexual identity, transcending issues of gender identity. And we can find them in some of the later developments of Buddhism. They start coming about in the Mahayana from about sort of 100, 200 AD, and really start exploding in popularity as the Buddhist movement in Tibet got richer and richer and developed more and more of these deities, of these Buddhist characters. So yes, Buddhism is a fairly safe space for the LGBTQ community, but we have to be cautious about the way that traditional Buddhists, let's say people from traditionally Buddhist countries, those sorts of societies, we have to be a bit cautious of what else has influenced them. And that's a much bigger topic for a much later video, where we can have a look at relationships and the attitude towards homosexual relationships and bisexual relationships and polyamorous relationships in traditionally Buddhist countries. Yes, the Buddha did not say anything that was wrong with any of them. Okay, so as long as we're not raping and pillaging, as long as we're not coercing or engaging in paedophilia, or if we're not having sex with our parents or our siblings, it's all great. No, not quite. It's all about being mindful, being careful, considering harm that's caused, and making sure that we are trying to develop stillness, simplicity, and contentment rather than seeking physical pleasure. It's not an easy precept, because cream cakes taste delicious. I hope you found that an interesting little discussion. Please do join me in the next video where we'll be looking at the fourth precept. I hope you'll join me then.